So what gets in your way of using your superpower? When I ask this question of my guest, the 9 times out of 10 answer is myself. So I was curious to learn more about how we get in our own way and, more importantly, how do we overcome that part of ourselves that blocks us? And that's when I met Nana Gyesie.
So if you're compassionate to yourself, you don't do abusive to you don't oh, you're silly, why'd you do that, Nana? Or you're this, why, or you're not good enough, so that's not going to happen. And these are all judgmental, self-judgment, come from self-judgment. So the opposite is compassion. And in moving away from self-judgment to compassion, one is overcoming one's programming. So if one is nurturing mindfulness, then one is also nurturing this real intuitive intelligence that comes from doing and being mindful or focused, if you want to call it that. And having a focused mind is actually the real revolution in a time where being distracted is now commonplace.
Nana is a leadership and life coach at Inner Mileage Consulting. He's a mindfulness teacher, a yoga instructor, and as you'll see, he's a profoundly deep thinker. He seamlessly interweaves science and psychology, religion, humanity, and humor into the conversation to help us understand why we get in our own way and how to get out of our own way. And although it takes all those disciplines to explain what's going on, Nana is quick to point out that it's the innate wisdom in each of us that helps us provide that path to compassion, joy, and purpose. And that path begins with awareness.
So the disciplined mind, it takes discipline to remain in the present. Most of us conveniently want to escape to the past or the future. That's why we're on our phones and doing all these things. But the present is where the discipline is. And in that discipline, the net results of your disciplined work brings joy. Therefore, begets more discipline, which brings joy. Because it actually proves that we, the humans on this planet, the 8 billion of us, are creators. We are the creators, whether we know it or not. Because AI was created by you and I. If we're doing malevolent things and it's learning from these large language models and the machine learning that is malevolent and kind, but mostly malevolent, then it's a reflection of humanity. So are we conscious about what we're creating or unconscious about what we're creating?
Yeah, we cover a lot of ground in this conversation, from what the Buddha says about joy to becoming a learner, from getting in our own way and preparing for the future of work, where AI and sentient computers become more commonplace. And through it all, Nana reminds us that we, humans, we are the creators. We have agency, and through awareness, if we're disciplined enough to embrace it, paraphrasing Amanda Gordon here, if we're disciplined enough to embrace it, if we're brave enough to be it. Welcome to the What Do You Know to Be True podcast. I'm Roger Kastner, and for over 25 years, I've been working with leaders and teams to explore and co-design new ways of thinking and taking action so that they can unlock their potential and create meaningful impact. In this podcast, I share conversations with ordinary people about their extraordinary skill, their superpower, and the meaningful impact it has on others. The goal is not to try to emulate or hack our way to a new talent. Instead, the intention is to learn more about their experience with their superpower, and in doing so, maybe we can learn something about the special talent in each of us that drives us towards our potential and living into our possibilities. If you're ready, let's dive in. Hey, Nana, thank you for joining me today. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm excited to learn more about your superpower of overcome yourself. But first, what would you like for us to know about you?
Oh, thank you, Roger. It's a pleasure to be here with you and with your audience. And what I want people to know about me is we are reflections of each other. So I am you and you are me, and we're all together, despite our avatars and the costumes we have for our avatar. So my avatar, I'm Nana Gyesie, based here in Seattle, really focused on coaching, transformational coaching, where for individuals, families, but also for organizations and business leaders. And the focus is really on understanding that all phenomena external, whether it's a book of business or trauma is always nearly related to an internal state, conscious or unconscious. So this is what we do. And prior to this, I had a long corporate stint with Microsoft, the Gates Foundation, the World Bank, Deloitte, Booz Allen, a few other blue chip places in various roles, mostly in leadership development, talent management. And so that's a bit of my focus. I'm a PCC certified coach, and the outfit I run now is called Inner Mileage Coaching, based in Seattle, but available for folks everywhere. And when I'm not coaching, you might find me on the streets with my camera, taking pictures of street subjects, or in the summer, you might catch me listening to loud reggae music with my windows down. So that's it.
Actually, on your website, innermileage.com, you do have beautiful photography on it. Those images are very evocative. It's not surprising that you're a photographer. I'm curious about the name of your business, though. Tell me a little bit more about that.
The name Inner Mileage actually came to me on a trip to Istanbul. Of course, one is in Istanbul, so one must go to the Blue Mosque. You hear the calls to prayer often, but this was on a Friday, which is largely the prayer-based day. And I'm outside hearing the call to prayer, and in that moment, I had this incredible feeling. I'm about to go to see this place that has Roman history and Byzantine history and all this history of the various eras. And I felt something inside, just the combination of the muazzin singing, and then just being in a different, unfamiliar place. I realized that travel to unfamiliar places is like traveling within to the unfamiliar parts of who we are. And that's how it started. Initially, it started as a photography project, but it always stuck with me. And it's almost like I knew that years later, this would be the basis of how I want to live my life, which is to provide an opportunity for organizations and people to get to the root cause of why there are limiting factors and full manifestation of whatever the scenario is. So this is what inner mileage is. It's about going within, not because one wants to be a monk, but it's realizing that everything without is from within, conscious, unconscious, or subconscious. You see? So that's where that comes from. It's a great question.
Oh, I love that. And I was thinking about like the mileage you get when you do travel and the benefits you get from it. I tend to think, oh, that means you have to be on more planes.
Yeah.
And, it's always, I think about the journey on the plane, not necessarily the destination. And in this one instance, maybe I should be thinking more about the destination but that's sitting on planes. I was wondering about the benefits you get from your frequent flyer mileage for inner mileage.
What these credit cards, whether it's Amex or whichever credit card you use, that provides all these perks to help you use the card even more and give you an incentive to use the card to travel and get these perks that make you want to travel, is tantamount to also doing the work within. Because the more you look within, whether it's journaling or waking up early to read the newspapers online before everyone wakes up, or waking up early to go for your run or do your yoga, these are all forms of perks from using your metaphorical credit card to get these frequent flyer miles. Because the more one invests in one's inner travels, whatever form that looks like, right? And I'm not suggesting people need to be meditation experts or Buddhist or what have you, but we can call it reflection time. And even reflection time is just putting your phone down for 2 minutes when you typically would use it mindlessly. That is a form of inner mileage, which gets you the frequent flyer miles. Because the more you do it, right, the more you are actually establishing a new pattern of thinking, a new way of being. Because we're very practiced in being distracted and not very mindful. So we're very good at being distracted and not very mindful, which leads to all kinds of phenomena that are not very helpful often, right? This unconscious way of living. And if one also does the same, that begins to practice being undistracted, here I'm referencing the work of Nair Eyal, or even James Clear on Atomic Habits. You practice becoming undistracted. You eventually become good at being undistracted. And especially now with artificial intelligence, that I've heard this notion of intuitive intelligence. So if one is nurturing mindfulness, then one is also nurturing this real intuitive intelligence that comes from doing and being mindful, or focused, if you want to call it that. And having a focused mind is actually the real revolution in a time where being distracted is now commonplace. So we're all distracted, including me, but can you have moments of mindfulness? And that's really the benefit of the metaphorical frequent flyer miles from this exercise.
Bonus points for you for taking my poorly formed analogy and taking off with it, if I can throw some puns in there. And I loved how you included in some of this mindfulness practice is not just meditation, but things like reading the paper or going for a run or going for a walk, taking a moment just to listen.
That's right.
And listen for the furthest sound away and then listen to the closest sound.
Exactly.
And just noticing and savoring and being undistracted feels really powerful and a great perk of that mileage.
It is. For a while, we heard a lot about the World Economic Forum's thoughts on the future of work. And in the past year, there's been a significant leap in that future. The future, generative AI, for the most part, is already here. So to paraphrase Canadian writer William Gibson, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. But now you have the nascent or the early stages of generative AI as a consumer tool, right? For employees, for workers, for business owners, for students. So you think about generative AI, when you say, what is the potential for AI on a mindful mind that knows how to collaborate with this tool for maximum impact? How does a leader in an organization do the same? What kind of mindset does it require? What kind of ways of working are now going to be contemporary versus ways of working that existed prior to March 5th, 2020? And everything just changes so quickly now. What kind of human do you have to be as a business leader, as an employee, as a business owner, as a manager, as a person, as a student, to effectively use the tools available, the good parts of the tools available for maximum impact, for pushing civilization forward in whatever field of work or field of endeavor that we're in? Because it's easy to look at it and say, well, AI is going to put doctors out of work. True. AI is going to shift many things. Very true. But there are professions that exist today that didn't exist 20, 30 years ago. In the same way, there will be professions today or tomorrow that exist that don't exist today. And it's about really understanding the upsides and using it. To be competitive is to have a non-attached mind. And what is a non-attached mind? It's sort of akin to what futurist Alvin Toffler talked about, that the future belongs to those who can learn, unlearn, and relearn. Alvin Toffler. That's what makes you relevant. That's what makes you young. That's what ensures that you're relevant. So if you think about this in very simplistic ways and say, okay, how do I continue to be of value to myself, my family, my community, my stakeholders? What is my value in this new context? Right? So similarly, people will say things about AI and the current civil world, and it all seems very problematic or it steals joy, which is true. But what's the upside? What are the opportunities here? What I would offer is, what are the opportunities? Because the constant that we all have to battle is time is thermodynamic. The nature of reality is always moving. So it is unnatural to be static. It is going against nature to be static, to be stationary. It's good to be still. What I mean static is stuck without moving with the flow of how things are, because everything is in constant vibration and movement. This is the quantum physics. It's all about looking at the opportunities and connecting and asking oneself what is one's purpose within these opportunities of change. And it is in asking those questions with courage and honesty that an orientation towards a certain purpose which provides value comes about, and one feels enriched because one is solving a problem in the market, whether for an organization or by oneself, and that adds to the value of the future of work in a way that's consistent with where we are today.
I think we could probably talk for an hour on many of the topics that you just talked about. One of them, though, that came forward for me, that inherent in everything you were just saying about purpose,
Yeah,
is that true purpose is when it's in service of other people.
correct.
And I think when people are thinking about generative AI and coming for their jobs, and I love how you referred to it as the intuitive intelligence. I think what's intuitive to being human is this innate knowledge that we're connected,
Mm.
and that we find meaning in being in
Mhm.
service of others. And you've all Noah Harari's latest book, Nexus,
Mhm.
where he's talking about the role of information
Mhm.
in civilization throughout the last 10,000 years, and now with AI coming in, that AI is only going to do what we program it to do, and then it's going to start generating its own thoughts. And if we do not program it with this benevolence of being in service and not do things that are negative for humans, then we might run into some hard times coming forward. But I think this idea of being attached to our purpose and being in service of others has always been our path to purpose and our path to meaningful existence. And I think that's not going to change.
You know, what you said is actually quite powerful because it actually proves that we, the humans on this planet, the 8 billion of us, are creators. We are the creators, whether we know it or not. Because AI was created by you and I. I mean, it was Jensen Wang and all these other folks, Sam Altman, but they are us by people. And so, to your point, if we're doing malevolent things and it's learning from these large language models and the machine learning that is malevolent and kind, but mostly malevolent, then it's a reflection of humanity. And then it develops its own consciousness, its own sentience, the sentience of AI tools. But that sentience is based on what the creators created. Hence, there's a new creation. Do you see where I'm going? Well,
Mm-hmm.
when the individual begins to understand that they are a creator, even in an organization, even if you're the lowest on the totem pole, you're there because you're creating something that is good for the aggregate. So we are creators. So are we conscious about what we're creating or unconscious about what we're creating? And that's where the mindfulness of thinking about where am I, where am I going, what do I want to do? Whether it's a leader thinking that, a leader who's running a $1 trillion organization, or a manager who manages a portfolio, right? Or a mom, or a husband, or a fiance, or whoever the person is, that we are all of value in this creation economy. Creating for yourself and others, creating a problem that solves something for you, hopefully solves problems for other people. Because we are connected in this way, right? The entanglement, quantum entanglement, or Ubuntu, or interbeing by taking a hand. So whether we like it or not, or whether we know it or not, there is this innate connection that we all have. So at the individual level, I'm Roger. What can I create? Consciousness, knowledge, information that shifts people within systems and paradigms. I'm Nana. What can I create? Empathy, mindfulness, self-actualization, right? Because this is all influenced by the things that influence how I came up. Whoever you are, if you're asking this question, what can I create in the context of this organization I work in? But often our own programming and trauma gets in the way in the form of limiting self-beliefs and excuses. And because we've been told we're small or insignificant, so we believe it. But we're sophisticated. We act like, oh, there are real reasons why I can't do it because I just had a child, or I don't have enough money, or I'm not smart enough. But this is a time for creation. That's the story. Is to realize that we all can create as an employee, as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as a human. And that creation, if it makes something better for you, means it may make something better for other humans like you as well. And if one is operating from that perspective of contributing and improving and adding, then one is relevant.
It made me think about where we're now collaborating with technology instead of other individuals to be able to produce something.
Mm.
And it made me think about a prompt is just a question. And when we're collaborating with others, and especially in the work that you and I do when we're coaching others, the collaboration comes in the form of questions.
Mm.
And so there's something powerful about, being a creator and being able to ask the right questions.
Absolutely. What you're talking about is the implicit side of things. So there's the explicit, which is obvious and right there. But the implicit side takes some skill, you see. But it's all about knowing how to think and how to organize thoughts. So similarly, if you go to grad school, even in college, you're taught this, but it's refined in grad school, right? If you're writing a thesis or a dissertation, what's your hypothesis? What's your conceptual framework? What's the proof? What's the counter proof? What's your evidence? What's your conclusion? And what are the implications for future research? You see, it's very organized. So your thinking cannot be assailed because you've considered all the contingencies. And I think the same is applicable now for working in this current context. When you talk about intuitive understanding, so intuitive understanding, you become more intuitive the more you've allowed yourself to realize that one is always a learner. Because if one is always a learner, one is always learning. And if one is always a learner and always learning, no matter how much you know, the more you realize you don't know. So the more you want to know. Therefore, the more you know, then the more you realize you don't know. So the pool of references, skills, capabilities expand significantly. Because you can organize your thoughts in the methodology that makes sense. Because everything can be reduced into 3 steps or 5 steps or 7 steps, for example. So all you have to do is how to organize it, and then the pedagogy of knowledge is reduced to its component parts, so it's not as complicated. This is how to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And so one learns how to learn, and if one learns how to learn and implement what one has learned, the one is always on the cutting edge. But it's all about, can you learn, and are you in sync with the needs in the market or your family or the organization or the group you're connected with, right? How do you become a leader in thinking that way? Is always to be a learner. That's why they say leaders are readers, right? Or readers are leaders. So the more one learns, the more one can connect more dots because one's bounded rationality increases significantly. But the more one knows, regardless of the field of expertise, the more of value one can be. But knowledge is a habit. The desire for knowledge is a habit.
One of the things I found to be inherent in what you were just saying is, as to be a learner, to be a leader, is asking questions. But the context in which you're asking those questions, the environment, is really important because, as you mentioned, the quantum, how things are constantly bouncing off each other. And so one of those simple frameworks might work in one context or one environment, and it's not going to work in another. So you have to have the connection between not only your own knowledge, your own questions, and your ability to connect what you're learning to what you already know, but then your ability to also scan the environment and understand, okay, what's applicable here and what's not, and what do I know and what do I not know, because that's going to be where your most effective questions an inquiry is going to be in.
Exactly.
Does that sound about right?
It sounds right, because the more you build a relationship with your intuition, and the more you build a relationship with tactile knowledge, then the more potent and the more effective it becomes, with some mistakes, right? So intuition will become second place. And the way, as you pointed out to, how do I understand that this context works well here and doesn't work well there, right? Or works well here, but is completely irrelevant to this context. And a lot of that comes from making mistakes and learning from those mistakes, because those are inevitable. But the mistakes become a point of wisdom. So mistakes are actually good. Mistakes are actually good, because it's an information source on what works and doesn't work and why. So one becomes smarter. So this notion of fail fast and fail often, because the more you're failing, the more you're learning. It's practice. It's all practice. Everything is practice. Even our bad habits are a result of practice. Our blind spots are a result of unconscious practice. So intuition becoming refined, is intuitive wisdom, refines itself based on conscious practice. You see.
I am so grateful for the notion and the wisdom you just dropped on me, as far as being able to recognize the sounds of ego versus intuition. I've never thought of it that way. And I think ego talks with either false bravado or it screams. Whereas intuition probably comes in with a quiet confidence.
That's right.
Oh, that is so helpful. That's worth the price of admission just right there.
It is.
Thank you, my friend.
We all have it. You have it. I have it. Everyone, whoever's watching this has it. You have it. You have it. You have it. We all have it.
But we have it. But that just the discernment to be able to hear the tone and tenor of the voice differently. That's the practice I'm going to start working on.
That's exactly right.
Based on, yeah, I love that. So Nana, you shared with me that you're a Buddhist.
Yes.
And so as through this exploration I'm going through around joy,
yes,
I'm very curious what the Buddha says about joy.
All suffering comes from a place of ignorance. This is what the Buddha said. And the reason we suffer is because we want to avert pain. I'm using some Buddhist terminology here. We crave more pleasure, and we're deluded into the nature of reality of existence. So in the Buddhist parlance, there's this notion of, the word is anicca, Anicca. And this is in the language called Pali, which is the language in which the Buddha spoke. It was the language of the day in northern India and parts of India at that time. And anicca simply means all things are impermanent. So remember in our chat, I said something about thermodynamism and everything is always moving. So a feature of the life we live and lead is everything is subject to change. At some point, you were the boy who was causing problems and your grandmother said, Roger, no. And now you're the man and the leader who's imparting knowledge and changing the world. And at some point, there'll be something else, right? So the nature of reality is everything changes, everything moves. Yet we are programmed to have mindsets that want fixed things. If I'm happy today, I want to be happy tomorrow as well. And then how can I guarantee I'm happy also on Sunday and then definitely on Monday? And then imagine when you start to think like that, that's what creates anxiety, because you're going against nature. So joy, to answer your question, comes from being in sync with the natural flow of things. Just like the book written by Flow, by Mikhail, I can't say his last name, I'm going to butcher it. Chinamansili. I messed it up big time. Mikhail C. Dr. Mikhail C. The book's title.
On a previous episode, I was schooled on how to say it.
Yeah.
It's like Chikmahali.
Chikmahali, that's it. The Flow. What is flow about? Flow is and applied to everything from neuroscience to science to business. It's about everything has a flow to it. Even the way organizations function have a flow to it. And if you want to disrupt it, you have to know the flow. Life has a continuous flow to it. Morning, evening, morning, afternoon, evening, beginning, end. Everything has a beginning and an end. And it's our attachment to beginnings and the desire for beginnings that are feel good to continue is what creates suffering in the modern mind. Because the modern mind is afraid of seeing anything that's not pleasurable. It increases fear because we're conditioned for pleasure. That's why we have all these challenges we have in modern society. But the Buddhist mind or the enlightened mind or the luminous mind recognizes that even in a bad situation, it's a portal to a good situation because we live in a life of balance. So negative leads to positive. Poverty can lead to wealth. Sadness is a precondition for happiness. Darkness is a precondition for light to shine. The fixed mind will say, darkness, I don't want anything to do with that. This is really bad. But there cannot be any light, Roger, without darkness. So these polarities bring balance. And the Buddhist mind that is luminous, or any mind, recognizes that these polarities exist for the purpose of balance. And there is joy in recognizing that and being able to ride the waves with equanimity, another Buddhist word, another Buddhist concept, an English word, but a Buddhist concept. Equanimity meaning accepting things as they are. Because in accepting things as they are, there is no resistance. And when there's no resistance, there's no suffering. And when there's no suffering, there's clarity on wise action, not conditioned action or fear-based action, wise action. So this is the concept of where joy comes from, which is accepting reality as it is. And in that acceptance, there is choice. And in that choice, because one is empowering oneself to be the creator, the chooser, rather than the victim of, oh, this just happened, there is joy in that self-efficacy. Knowing that in every moment, there is a choice that can be made.
In these conversations I'm having about joy and the research that I'm doing, there seems to be sometimes some confusion and or mixing of definitions between joy and happiness. How do you separate the two?
Yeah, so I think you're talking about the distinction between what's fleeting and what is sustainable and real. So pleasure, or the so-called pursuit of happiness, is in seeking moments that don't last. So you have it, and then there's an addiction to get it again because anything other than that is unsatisfactory. That's what leads to this kind of this rat race, this acquisitive nature, this protectionist nature, mind, because that happiness is fleeting and for a moment. But joy is different. Joy is rooted in nothing but awareness. Not because I got the promotion or I got that $100 million contract, right? Because even 2 days later, we'll wear off and I'll think, well, when I get the $150 million contract, right? More. Real joy is in seeing things as they are and accepting it as they are. And in that acceptance, there's a recognition of your power and efficacy to choose differently, mentally and emotionally. And when one chooses differently, mentally and emotionally, then one begins to manifest differently because everything is magnetic. Or the neuroscientists talk about confirmation bias. This is going to be bad. This is going to be bad. My mind seeks the evidence is going to be bad, and then it's bad. But even if it's bad, the Buddhist mind will say, well, okay, it happened. What does this mean? And what can I take away from it? What's the opportunity here? It's horrible. There's nothing I can do. And then in that, there is wisdom. because the reason we suffer is because everything bad that happens to us is actually a chemical reaction. So there's cortisol and all these things in our bodies that say, this is bad. So we have to play the same chemical game to have more dopamine, which is saying, this is challenging, but what's my efficacy here? And in that, one shifts from being a victim to a victor mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where joy comes in. Joy comes from realizing that whatever happens, I am not that. My awareness is superposed to the phenomena that's bad or good. That what's bad and good is simply another phenomena that rises and falls, because the constant here is my awareness. That the awareness is constant and everything is just passing. They're just waves, like clouds in the sky.
Well, I want to tap into your wisdom on another topic,
Yes.
and that's your superhero power of overcome yourself. Tell me a little bit about that superhero power and what that means to you.
Overcoming yourself simply means having self-empathy, which is very hard to do, because even the most empathetic person believes their empathy is driven by how much they give to Amnesty International or to the person on the street who needs help, or to their children or their family, or how much more they do at work for whoever, how much they volunteer. And those things are all really fantastic. But empathy starts, real empathy, not transactional empathy, starts with the self. Because when you're kind to yourself, you're now beginning the process of overcoming your conditioning. And very few of us are actually conditioned to be self-loving all the time, because we have parents who didn't know that either, because they were conditioned to look externally, and then therefore their parents were the same way, which means their parents were the same way, which means their parents were the same. I mean, the National Institute of Health, and I often quote this, has a study that shows that trauma is passed on between 7 and 14 generations, right? So if you decide to break trauma, you're doing something that at least 1,000 of your ancestors couldn't do. That includes your 2 parents, your 4 grandparents, the 8 before, the 16 before, the 32 before, the 64 before, the 128 before, the 256 before, the 512 before. That's over 1,000 people in your direct lineage over 400 or 500 years. That couldn't break a pattern that you, whoever you are, is deciding to break, whether it's the pattern of divorce or poverty or not being successful or not being happy or being riddled with disease, whatever the thing is, that's in the family lineage. It continues because of mirror neurons. And it also continues because of epigenetics, right? Epigenetics means it's passed in the DNA. So overcoming yourself starts with self-compassion, which is to pour into your cup first. What do I need? Why do I feel the way I do? And in doing that, you actually overcome all the unkindness that is a cause and condition of our modern life. And in doing so, you can extend compassion authentically, if needed, to another person, and if you have the right boundaries, to another person. And it is in compassion between beings that makes us human. Compassion is what is needed for all humanity. We all crave it in the most narcissistic or the most psychopathic people want validations, a sort of good feeling, even if it may be mentally perverse. So you realize that it's compassion to be seen, heard, and validated. And the first person to do that for you genuinely is you, unless you have or had a conscious parent or caregiver who done it for themselves so they could offer it to you. And it is from this point that you treat yourself in a way that is kind and caring, not abusive. So if you're compassionate to yourself, you don't do abusive to you, don't oh, you're silly, why'd you do that, Nana? Or you're this, why, or you're not good enough, so that's not going to happen. And these are all judgmental, self-judgment, come from self-judgment. So the opposite is compassion. And in moving away from self-judgment to compassion, one is overcoming one's programming or any other programming that suggests that you're not as worthy as you are. So you're not worthier than anyone or less worthier than anyone. You just are worthy. And it's just about coming to that understanding without any qualification, that you don't have to qualify for worthiness, as the world tells us. So you find that in yourself, then you don't have to worry about exclusion or ostracization. And then you can be a buffer for that happening to other people because you've given it to yourself. And so this applies to any and everything. It's about overcoming one's conditioning. And we live in a conditioned world, and there's conditioning, good and bad. So here we're talking about no conditioning. So your only self can emerge, your true self can emerge, which is very difficult to do because we're all conditioned. So how do you move from the conditioned self to the unconditioned? That's what overcoming yourself, even if you uncondition yourself just a bit, is really what this is about. It's about reclaiming your true identity in a way, if it's possible for you, or a measure of your true identity, because not all of us can go on silent retreats and spend time in the Himalayas. But awakening is available to anyone who seeks it earnestly.
Mm. Oh, I love all of that. And it's reminding me of so much of the wisdom that's been shared in these conversations before. It makes me think of Melissa Martinez Barrasso, who I interviewed earlier this year, and we talked about savoring. And she was saying how, like, you don't have to do anything to deserve the best things in life. And it makes me think about the interview I did with Enrique Martin, who was talking about empathy and really talking about sympathy is having pity for others, whereas empathy is actually feeling with them. And it starts, as he would agree with you, it starts with you. And so all this wisdom is just pouring through, and I'm able to pull on those conversations, coming right back to this moment that's very given me a lot of joy. And it makes me wonder, like, who or what inspired you to have this superhero power of overcoming yourself?
Yeah, it comes from actually looking at my own trauma from growing up. So it comes from a lot of suffering from family of origin or personal life or professional life, all kinds of suffering. But then I realized that the suffering was a portal to understanding something. Because why I'm the common denominator here. Why does this keep happening? And it's in that uncovering that I realized and came to understand more about who I am and how I'm made up as an empathetic person, an empath, and what that means. And understanding that helped me understand my whole journey. Because you don't make sense of the journey when it's happening, you make sense of it in retrospect. So I saw the common themes, and I realized that all that pain or trauma or suffering or challenges or obstacles were all initiation for this understanding. And so, as the same way I would describe my experience, that it came from a lot of pain, which was actually inputs for transmutation, not punishments. Like, oh, I'm a victim, look at that. But the inputs for the transmutation, which is why I'm well positioned to do the work that I do for those who I do it with. And also the opportunity to sit here with you is a net result of all that. So it's not from a place of kumbaya and everything being great. It's actually being initiated by great suffering, which is a common human experience for most of us. We all suffer. No one is exempt from suffering. There are varying degrees of suffering, but suffering is suffering. And mine was the raw material for overcoming myself, rather than sticking to the story that I was handed by my trauma, justifying why I would be the way I was. Like, no, it can't be that. So overcoming yourself is overcoming the predictive story to inhabiting the place of a truer reflection of your internal self.
Was there a moment when you realized that these generational gifts of trauma and the trauma that you were experiencing, and you wanted to make that shift? You wanted to choose to do something positive with that, and turn this from and ultimately overcome yourself.
That's right.
In that moment, was there a specific action that you took that was most impactful to help you?
Meditation,
Okay.
meditation and yoga, meditation especially. I've been flirting with meditation for decades, but when I started to get very serious about it, when you meditate, it's you. The practice I do, Vipassana, which is insight meditation, it's just about you and your mind. No mantra, no music. No, it's just you being with what is. And so your conditioned mind becomes apparent to you. And the shame of the conditioned mind. I remember on one retreat I was on, it was a 10-day retreat. And I became aware of how conditioned my mind was to judgment. Oh, look at her. What is she doing? Look at him. Oh, gosh, what are they doing? And wow, this is incredible. I just thought I was just sitting here enjoying it, and look at the number of judgments that poured out in 1 minute. Because all judgments of others is self-judgment. It's a reflection of self-loathing, right? So I had to, what is it that's making me so conditioned to judge? Something that we do, humans do. And there's a difference between discernment and judgment. But why am I judging so much? This negative space of judgment, because I feel judged. So then that's what that is. So that's an example of overcoming oneself. And that came from meditation. So did yoga. Yoga is about somatic release because it's often said that the body keeps score. So trauma is stored in the body. So whether it's working out or running or walking or going to nature or whatever one, if it's available to one, because not everybody's able-bodied, right? So even if you're not able-bodied, you can use your mind to imagine that you're doing that. And neuroscience proves that you have a similar impact on your physical. So somatic release, mindfulness, but before those two comes a desire to not be sick and tired of being sick and tired. Like, why does this keep happening again and again and again and again? You have to get tired of that. And when you get tired of that, it's the portal. It brings you to this fork in the road. You take the road most traveled or least traveled. And most traveled is to remain with your conditions as it is because it's easier. Or least traveled is realizing, oh goodness, I'm going to have to take this path of really working on myself and improving myself. So that's the journey.
So where and how does joy show up for you when you're using your superpower of overcome yourself?
Joy shows up as a recognition of the transformation that has happened and the humility that I was a mirror helping that to happen. And then I move on. That is joy. Not getting too attached to the phenomena, just acknowledge it and then moving on.
I have this idea, this theory that joy is not only an outcome, but I also believe that joy can be a motivator to go into that space that, I know I will be, when I feel joy, I am closer to my potential. I'm closer to my purpose. Do you also find joy as a motivator?
So I think if I'm hearing correctly, you may be talking about freedom or discipline or both. Or at least that's what I heard. So I'll tell I'll reflect back my experience. In the Buddhist tradition, there's this notion of when you get on this journey, 2 words: start, continue. Start, continue. And if for some reason you drop off, begin again. Begin again. So the more one practices, then that's part of the reprogramming. And it takes discipline to be a practitioner because the unconscious distracted mind is undisciplined. That's why it's distracted. But I'm here, I'm there, I'm there. But the disciplined mind is aware. It's here. Like I am with you right here. I'm looking at you. I'm right here. I know what time it is. I know what's going right here. But the undisciplined mind is not, it's in the past or the future. So the disciplined mind, it takes discipline to remain in the present. Most of us conveniently want to escape to the past or the future. That's why we're on our phones and doing all these things. But the present is where the discipline is. And in that discipline, the net results of your disciplined work brings joy. Therefore begets more discipline, which brings joy.
Nana, what do you know to be true about overcome yourself?
That it's available to all of us if we desire it or when we desire it. If, because not everybody will, but when is the certitude that when you do desire it, it's there for you. We are made to overcome ourselves, our conditioned
Mm.
selves, as a leader, as an individual, as a family, as an organization. It's innate to us.
What did you believe early on about overcome yourself to be true that you've come to learn is not true?
I thought circumstances were kind of, there's a saying in Arabic, maktub. It's written. This is my personality. This is my destiny. At any point in time, you can shift the narrative by, to quote Michael Pollan, by changing your mind. So if we want to become creators too, rather than supporting the creation of others, then we have to connect to what is true for us, and what is true objectively.
So, Nana, what's next for you and your superpower?
Well, still coaching. I'm creating a new course on overcoming narcissistic abuse. So that should be launched in January. So that'll be my third course. More coaching, more master classes, and I can be found on all social media, Inner Mileage, whether it's TikTok or Instagram or on YouTube. It's the same moniker, Inner Mileage, or at innermileage.com. So just helping more folks who want to be helped discover their truth so they can overcome themselves, whether they're business leaders or individuals or whoever, or a team or a family. It's really about being an effective mirror so they can see what's there, so they can get past it or get through it, because you can't avoid it. Get through it so they can get to the other shore, the other side, where they want to be.
The only way out is through it,
That's
huh?
it. That's it. That's it. Really,
Yeah.
really, really, really.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that is central to everything you've said. That is your
That's
superpower, right?
it. That's it.
Nana, thank you so
Oh,
much
I,
for everything you've shared. It is super meaningful for me. It's going to be meaningful for the audience. It's going to be an inspiration, and I think maybe a little bit of a challenge for us to look a little deeper in ourselves and see, okay, what's the thing that we could work at
that's right.
overcoming, and what's the thing I could look at and overcoming. I know I'm going to take on that, feeling inspired and a little challenged to do that, because as we just said, the only way out is through.
You said it, and I want to thank you for overcoming yourself, Roger, and being a conduit for information, for knowledge, for wisdom, particularly in this wisdom economy, this intuitive economy. It's not just about working hard, it's about working intelligently and efficiently and smart. So, this is the new paradigm, and you are a leader in this new paradigm, because we're in the era of leadership empathy, not so much, like you said earlier. I used to be into the work, and now I'm into the people around the work, right? So, this is the pivot. So, empathy and wisdom are not just fancy words that don't mean anything, because the nature of work, white collar work primarily, has shifted significantly, that you don't need to be that old time overseer, right? So this is the paradigm, and you're very much on the wave of this new paradigm. So I celebrate you, and I congratulate you for the good work that you're doing, and thanks for the opportunity to be here to share with your audience, and of course my audience, as we share it as well. So I am because you are.
Mm. Oh, Nana, and I know I am, because you are, for everything you've shared with me, and for our, like, I'm grateful for the next conversation and the next conversation
Yes,
after
yes,
that.
yes.
Thank you so much.
My
Have a
pleasure.
beautiful
Thank
day.
you, thank you. To be continued.
Thank you all for being in this conversation with us. And thank you, Nana, for sharing what you know to be true about how we can all overcome ourselves and be more mindful and impactful in the moment. The question I'm asking myself after this conversation is, what am I going to learn about myself when I create more space for awareness? What Do You Know to Be True is a Three Blue Pens production, and I'm your host, Roger Kastner. We are recording on the ancestral lands of the Duwamish and Suquamish people. To discover the ancestral lands of the indigenous people whose land you may be on, you can go to native-lands.ca. Okay. Be well, my friends. Love you. Mean it.
But this is one perspective. I'm sure there are other perspectives.
Yeah, but I'm talking to you, so I want to hear your
Yeah.
perspective. What is the proper way to pronounce your name?
Oh, yeah. It's easier than it looks. So, way easier. So, the African pronunciation is Nana Gyesie.
Nana
Gyesie.
Gyesie.
But if you want to Americanize it, Nana Gyesie. So think about JC like Jay-Z, JC. That's it. Banana Nana. That's it.
Nana Gyesie.
That's it.
Okay. I've always heard people say people love to hear their name. And yet when people use my name in a sentence, I'm like, uh-oh. Did they think I wasn't paying attention? Am I in trouble?
You know why?
Because I was a little shit when I was a kid.
No, I don't think that's why. It could be. That's partially you. You know yourself better.
My grandmother used to tell me that I must have thought my name was Roger No. It still cracks me up when people are like, so, the reason why we're talking about this, Roger, is blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, whoa, hey, what? No. I was paying attention.
No, yeah, exactly. I'm here. No need to call me out. We're making eye contact.